Hello, my name is David Lopez, and I'm going to give you a brief description of what SE, otherwise known as Somatic Experiencing, is all about. First off, it's a trauma modality to deal with trauma, so we have to define what trauma is. Trauma happens, and all kinds of stuff is associated with trauma. In fact, anything that is considered to be life-threatening, experienced in a negative way, and that has a negative impact on our daily experiencing could be considered to be trauma. It often is not recognized as trauma, and it's just lived with. It becomes something that I just have never been the same after the accident, the assault, the emotional breakup. A traumatic event is defined as an event that causes long-term dysregulation in the autonomic and core nervous system of the body. This would be to say that trauma is in the nervous system of the body, and it's not the event itself. So what is traumatic for one person may not be traumatic for another person. That's really important. It identifies that the ability to self-regulate is going to be different for everybody. Everybody's going to have a different tolerance in a different event. It's why somebody in a war situation is able to go through it and not be affected or be affected very minimally, and another person might be affected for the rest of their life. For the purpose here, a simple working trauma definition is anything that is too much, too soon, too fast for our nervous system to handle appropriately, especially if the body can't reach a successful resolution in how it wants to handle it, and it results in either a fight, flight, or freeze rather than a regulation and a processing and then going on. So what's somatic experiencing? About it is that one of the most interesting parts about it, it works from a what's right perspective. So it's different than almost all other traditional therapies. It finds what's right and then builds from that, as opposed to identifying a problem and then building on a problem. So it's very strengths-based process. It recognizes and deals with the extreme and inescapable stress that comes from the automatic nervous system responding in a paradoxical way. By that, I mean that it's both calm and agitated at the same time, and the frustration and the conflict that comes from having those two opposite emotions at the same time. It's a form of trauma therapy that emphasizes guiding the client's attention into a kinesthetic and proprioceptive experience. What does that mean? It means that the therapist actually works with the client to take them into the event. First off, surrounds them with what's right, takes them into the event, and regulates them so that they can process the emotion. One thing that SE does is it avoids any sort of a direct and intense remembering or evocation of traumatic memories. It is not exposure therapy. Exposure therapy is you do it enough times, you hit it enough times, and the memory or the sensation will leave because you've been exposed to it so much that it no longer bothers you. Through the work with SE, it's shown that it's exactly the opposite, that all of the exposure, it just tightens up even, the person tightens up even further to protect themselves from the exposure, and doesn't really help at all. SE is a very gentle approach to trauma. It works with the charged memories indirectly and very gradually. It helps the body to self-regulate with new corrective experiences that physically contradict those of the overwhelm and helplessness of the original trauma. It's really a beautiful experience to work with and go through. Person who created SE was Peter Levine, Dr. Peter Levine. He did this over 35 years of his study. It does draw from many different disciplines to address the physiology of stress and trauma. There are studies to it, but they're all qualitative studies. Dr. Levine, he was curious about the fact, it prompted all of it, it sounds so crazy, but that animals out in the wild weren't traumatized by their many life and death experiences. In comparison, people can be traumatized by events that seem inconsequential, but they live with that trauma and they slip into that fight, flight, or freeze. So after being overwhelmed by something or an event, and it throws the nervous system off kilter into the fight, flight, or freeze, the nervous system needs to be reset. And that was the intention of Dr. Levine, to provide a modality to reset the nervous system. So somatic experiencing, how does it work? Trying to do this in 10 minutes is difficult. Let's try. It asserts that attention to the body, to the client's body, along with their movement and their imagery, that it can lead to the resolution of the symptoms resulting from the traumatic stress. It starts off seeming like a chat or just a talk, and a skilled SE practitioner will be observing the body's reaction, the heart rate, how they're sitting, their posture, the rate of speech, what sort of movements they're making continually, the eye movement. All of this is taken into effect, and the practitioner is reading the person. This is different than traditional cognitive therapies, in that the major intervention strategy involves what they call a bottom-up processing, by directing the client's attention to different internal sensations. So somebody might be moving, and constantly, every time I was in the car accident, I moved, and I pushed. That would be something for an SE practitioner to start dealing with. So you moved in the car accident, and now where was your arm? What were you pushing toward? What did you see? To walk them through it and allow their body and the traumatic discharge to occur. The resolutions, it happens as a result of a completion of a thwarted, biologically based self-defense, self-protective response. Somebody in a car accident, it might be this movement that as the car accident was happening, they were putting their hand out and they could see the glass shattering, they can see the other car, they can see maybe perhaps the face of the opposite driver, and they were moving their arm to protect themselves. This is the emotion within this movement is what has to be released. So what does a person expect in a somatic experiencing session? The one thing is that the therapist will begin watching. The therapist will listen, in the initial phone call, we'll watch the client. How do they come in? Where do they come in? Where do they sit? Do they sit first? Do they wait? Is their effect appropriate? Is their effect fit the words they're saying? Are they saying no and shaking their head yes, or vice versa? Are they saying, oh yeah, it was my right shoulder and they're touching the left? All of this is taken into effect. Slowly, very gently, the client is taken into noticing about themselves, about what happened, how they reacted, and you allow them to recover in their own way before you take them any further. That's part of the re-regulating of the nervous system. The discharge of the threat is being successfully overcome. When it happens, there might be some twitching, there might be, most often it's heat sensations, sometimes cold sensations. Client will say, oh yes, I feel the heat in my chest, now I feel it in my head, and now it's like my fingers are on fire. It's a biological response, and you take it slow, and you allow the person to have the sensation without taking them fully into the to return to the trauma. You're allowing the body to release. The body returns to a baseline of allowing that chemical discharge to move through the nervous system. And again, sometimes it's trembling, sometimes it's shaking, but they are there is typically a reaction. And each step or layer that you take them through each cycle, there may be a new discharge of a different kind. Sometimes it's going to be a heat sensation, sometimes a cold sensation, sometimes it's a movement. But whatever it is, you follow them, you follow their body, and you return them back to the neutral, back to the base, secure base. And each time you have that successful completion, the body increases its resiliency and its capacity to handle more. So you don't, load on them at first. You find out their resilience. You give them a little, and you allow them to process that. And each time you go through it, a little more, you get a little closer. And as you are, the body is self-regulating. The process resets the mind and body as it prepares for the next challenge or the next level. Slowly, the client comes to know and more than that, feel that they're safe and what is not safe, and they're able to stay present in their body. There can be situations where you're talking with a client and boom, their coping strategy during the time of the trauma was to leave, disassociate. So there might be some of that. And again, that would signal to the practitioner that no, you're moving too fast. It needs to be very, very slow. Having a person disassociate within the SE model, it does no good. They've left, and you need to get them back in order to have them start to re-regulate. For that sort of a person, it might be something where you do very, very small steps, and a lot of orientating into the now, a lot of orientating into what's good and right for them. Each of the sensations is explored without any sort of a guilt or judgment or avoidance, right? There's no, you should have, you could have, what would you done instead? No, you just go with them wherever they go through. It's their script, and you're helping them to re-regulate. One of the expressions in SE is you titrate. What it means is you become to understand what is within the person's hot button, if you would, the regulation that is considered normal here, and you get to here it's hot, you get to here it's hot, it becomes unbalanced. Within that, you stay in the middle, and you're constantly going back and forth, and always when you come back to the positive, it's more, and it's at many more different levels. By helping do that, you also strengthen their other boundaries. It's somewhat of a little bit of a tightrope when you're walking through it. When somebody who's highly activated, so the practitioner needs to be careful with that. The client, each time they become more resilient, increasing their capacity to self-regulate. The healing, if you want to use that word, takes place at the deep level within the nervous system, and the fight, flight, or freeze symptoms leaving a much more resilient and self-regulating body and nervous system. The changes sometimes can be dramatic. Sometimes they can only be subtle, only be noticed after, hey, do you remember when I got excited about every time I went through an intersection because of the car accident? It doesn't happen anymore. Changes are mostly long-term. What happens is that sometimes there will be something much more specific to the actual traumatic event, or there might be another trauma that comes up that a person has been carrying that's associated to the one they came in for, and that trauma, the client will have to decide if they want to deal with it or not. Mostly they do. So what's the intention, the whole game behind somatic experiencing? The whole idea is to reestablish the rhythm of the nervous system, the natural regulation of the nervous system, to remind our body to focus on physiological responses that occur when someone experiences or remembers a traumatic event in his or her body. rather than only through the thoughts or the emotions connected to it. So again, it's different than most talk therapy. You're actually identifying the sensations within your body and feeling them and allowing your body, your nervous system to process the trauma. A healthy, self-regulating body is able to process trauma without a fight or flight or freeze response. The trauma causes our body, sometimes the trauma causes our body to get stuck in the fight, flight, or freeze. And our bodies naturally want to resolve it. That's how come there's that tension. You have somebody who's calm, somebody who's agitated, and they're both occurring at the same time. The body is saying, wait a second, I got to fix this. That's the reason that they can't fully relax. They have this conflict of feelings inside of the body. Through the SE, you take it back, and you're able to teach their body how to release that and re-regulate. Understanding our bodies allows our nervous system to better self-regulate. One of the things that Peter Levine wrote, it really caught my ear, is that trauma is a fact of life. It does not, however, have to be a life sentence. That really clicked with me. Somatic experiencing, people would say, oh, it's just like this, it's just like that. Well, I don't know that it is, but I do know that it's more aligned with certain types of therapies. They call them body psychotherapies. They're much more advanced in Europe than it is in the US, although they do have a USA Body Psychotherapy Association where many of these you can find. Something like SE was at the fringe many years ago, and it's starting to come in more into the limelight and become more accepted. Other modalities that are like it are EMDR is probably the biggest one. It uses a lot of the same cues and regulation. I've had a training in EMDR. It seems to me it lets go of the gently that SE does, and family system therapy uses it as well. Hakomi, if you're familiar with the Hakomi method, again, that's through movement. Alexander method, same way. Feldenkrais, if you're familiar with that, and allowing your body to move however it moves. These are all other modalities that are more closely aligned, but they each have their distinctions. For me, my personal experience, I approached SE probably about 10 years ago or so, and I had a childhood trauma that I was trying to resolve, and I had tried several times through traditional talk therapy. I also had a car accident that I was trying to resolve, and SE was so moving and powerful for me that my trauma was resolved. It sounds so crazy, but it was. I started taking the 3-year practitioner training, which I completed. Since then, I've worked with many clients experiencing many different types of trauma, and it's a beautiful thing to see the person, resolve their traumatic experiences. So on the website, I'm going to post a couple different links when I upload the video. Traumahealing.org is the official SE website, and then the USA Body Psychotherapy Association, I'll put that up there as well. And if you're interested in looking for SE practitioner, interview them. It really becomes like other modalities. It's a chemistry thing. You want to know that they've been doing it for a bit, and that you feel comfortable with them. That you have to feel comfortable with them. You establish whatever that comfortable is. But I hope this has given you an idea of SE, and that you'll know what it is for perhaps your future use or referral. Thank you.